Hello, everyone, and welcome to our debate. My name is Victoria Vent, and I will be the moderator for this debate. This debate will be providing information about in-home ABA and tele-ABA, and will be in the format of a formal debate. We will also be discussing the ethical considerations that align with each of these topics. The other members of this debate include Courtney to provide the introduction, Marcy and Jessica on the pro side, and Ann and Stephen on the con side. Courtney will now start us off with the introduction for this debate.
Autism is a developmentally pervasive disorder with a wide range of characteristics and symptoms affecting 1 out of 68 children. Autism is characterized by deficits in communication and social skills and repetitive restrictive behaviors. These two deficits compose the criteria for diagnosis, but it is common for individuals with autism to have comorbid conditions like ADHD. Having additional mental disorders and health issues creates challenges in day-to-day life, resulting in need for treatment. Autism is not curable, but treatment options are available. Evidence-based practices are the most researched interventions available and have become the standard for treatments in medicine and psychology. Among evidence-based practices, the most significant findings have been found in applied behavior analysis. Applied behavior analysis is derived from classical and operant conditioning and used in a therapeutic form to modify behaviors. Applied behavior analysis therapy, or ABA therapy, is the only empirically supported treatment for individuals with autism. The purpose of ABA therapy is to bring meaningful and positive changes into the affected individual's life. ABA therapy can help diminish undesirable behaviors such as self-harm, tantrums, and property destruction. Conversely, positive behaviors can be developed through applied behavior analysis therapy, like speech and social skills. Services are delivered by a team of professionals, which include a board-certified behavior analyst and at least one therapist. The board-certified behavior analyst, or BCBA, creates individualized programs around the needs and goals of the child, which is then implemented by the therapist. Data is collected by the therapist during the session to track progress and then analyzed by the BCBA to shape the program even more to suit the child and continue progression. Treatment is typically provided in-home, but can be delivered through internet services. Depending on the severity of the child's autism, sessions can occur several times a week and up to every day, and in some cases, 40 hours a week. Sessions can include various approaches like discrete trial training, naturalistic teaching, and pivotal response training. In due time, behavior changes will occur through positive and negative reinforcement. Extinguishing undesirable behaviors and developing new skills is the goal for treatment. Children will learn better communicative skills, whether verbal or nonverbal, social skills, literacy, and other academic skill sets. Additionally, life skills like feeding oneself, personal hygiene, proper bathroom use, and dressing can be learned. ABA therapy is an up-and-coming field, and as much as it is imperative for the treatment of autism, it can be difficult to come by. There are not enough workers to meet the needs of the autism population. The autism population outnumbers the amount of BCBAs and therapists drastically. Since the practice of this therapy is modern, BCBAs and therapists implementing the procedures can be scarce depending on location and financial status. This gap in resources can be detrimental to one's prognosis. With that said, non-specialists like parents and caregivers have been implementing therapy themselves by using telehealth. Telehealth is a technology used by practitioners in various medical and health fields to communicate through the internet via video calls. The practice has been around for 30 years and has been newly adopted into the field of applied behavior analysis for about 10 years now. Tele-ABA utilizes all of the same interventions and principles as traditional in-home therapy, except the behavior analyst does not come to the home and only communicates with clients and caregivers through video call. The behavior analyst provides training to the person implementing the services and observes sessions as they occur. Also, online supplemental materials like lesson plans are distributed to the parents or the person implementing the therapy. The behavior analyst will give feedback as the session occurs, as they would if the session were face-to-face. Tele-ABA services the gap in resources for those with autism who are hoping for in-home therapy sessions. Marcy is the prover pro for our debate. She will be discussing topics like family who reside in rural areas, families who must pay out-of-pocket costs for ABA therapy, and families who are not native English speakers.
I just want to do a quick sound check before I begin. Can you guys hear me? Great. All right. So as Courtney mentioned before, tele-ABA is an up-and-coming method of delivering ABA services with a registered BCBA via a web-based internet program such as Skype or Google Hangouts. Although direct in-person therapy is the standard through which ABA was originally derived and is most commonly practiced, this method simply does not work for a large minority of families who seek ABA services for their children. The use of tele-ABA will bring ABA to families who are unintentionally discriminated against in their search for an ABA professional. This includes 1, families who reside in rural areas, 2, families who must pay out-of-pocket expenses for ABA therapy, and 3, families who are not native English speakers. When looking at the United States, families who reside in rural areas simply do not have as much and sometimes any access to ABA clinics as do their metropolitan counterparts. While autism, which is currently estimated to affect 1 in every 68 children in the US, is just as common in rural America, ABA therapists are not. Unfortunately, there is a shortage of practicing BCBAs in rural communities. If we look at Texas, for example, the distribution of BCBAs across rural and metropolitan counties is particularly evident. According to the 2010 census, there are 177 rural counties in Texas. The BACB website currently lists 609 registered BCBAs throughout the entire state. Of those 609 BCBAs, only 21 reside in and therefore provide services in those rural counties. The other 588 registered BCBAs in Texas continue to serve the 77 metropolitan counties. Therefore, rural families must either relocate to find behavior specialists for their children with ASD or rely on the school districts to provide those services for them. This is simply not a fair standard to invoke on families who do not live in or near cities. But thankfully, with telemedicine technology, individuals in rural communities have better access to the same interventions that are available to their urban counterparts. Moving on, tele-ABA has also been shown to reduce the out-of-pocket expenses that are typically associated with in-home therapy, especially for families who don't have ABA covered by their insurance. For example, in a large study that was conducted by Wacker et al., the outcomes and costs for implementing evidence-based ABA procedures to reduce problem behavior was compared using 3 service delivery models. So it was compared with in-home ABA, clinic-based telehealth, and home-based telehealth. The results of the study showed that while all 3 of these delivery methods exhibited a 90% reduction in problem behavior for all of the clients, total costs for implementing the treatments were not the same across all 3 methods. The lowest costs were in both of the telehealth models and especially the in-home telehealth model. So this not only illustrates the financial advantages of tele-ABA, but it also shows that it can be just as effective as in-home ABA. This data is also representative of the fact that in-home internet access is not a necessary component for tele-ABA to work, as if a family doesn't have a strong or any internet connection, then the family can simply visit a local clinic in the area that is able to provide the telehealth service. Lastly, families who are not native English speakers might be able to benefit from a tele-ABA model. Due to the nature of the internet, in that it is able to connect people regardless of their location, tele-ABA has the ability to link non-English speaking families with BCBAs who are bilingual. This characteristic of tele-ABA can help close the language gap that is currently experienced by families who are unable to receive the proper parent training due to the language barriers they experience in the tele-ABA community. As you can see in the survey, which was distributed to students who were enrolled in an SPCE 619 Professional Issues in ABA class, 18 people responded, to the question, do you believe that tele-ABA could help families who do not speak English as a first language by connecting them with bilingual BCBAs? Out of the 18 who responded, a majority, 14 people responded that yes, they do believe that tele-ABA could help close this language gap that is unfairly experienced by families who do not speak English. In conclusion, teleservices are on the rise and have been implemented successfully in a variety of areas. For example, education. We are all familiar with this as we are all currently enrolled in a teleeducation or online program to obtain our master's degrees in ABA. There are a variety of reasons we may have chosen this path. Perhaps it was a lack of access to a nearby school that offers an ABA program. Maybe it was the cost benefit of being enrolled in an online program, or maybe it was the ability to have a flexible schedule by pursuing school online. While in-person educational programs are the traditional and standard model, being enrolled in an online school does not affect our ability to learn or benefit professionally. Tele-ABA is only following in the footsteps of models like this that have proven to be successful. It is only fair and ethical that we continue to provide online ABA services for families who are more inclined to succeed in this way. Thanks.
Thank you, Marcy. Next, we will have Anne on the con side, and she will be discussing concerns of confidentiality, issues with internet access, and also support issues.
So one of the most significant concerns of tele-ABA is one of confidentiality. Others may see, overhear private or sensitive information. In addition, others with access to the computer may view files and videos that contain private or sensitive information. The internet access can also be an issue, such as some families cannot afford the equipment necessary for tele-ABA delivery of services, and they would need to go to a library or a community center, etc. Again, this would pose a potential problem with confidentiality. Even for those who can afford the equipment, the cost to maintain it could be prohibitive and outside of the budget for some families. For tele-ABA services to be implemented, or the internet access must be high speed and reliable for high quality voice, data, graphics, video, live streaming, etc. And over 10% of Americans, or 34 million, 39% of rural Americans do not have these advanced telecommunication services. Technical issues also cause problems for accurate observation by the behavior analyst of the target behavior and for implementation of intervention. For example, a study by Rule et al. Cited technological and programmative challenges that were hard and even impossible to overcome. So tele-ABA also presents concerns surrounding support. It presents a challenge in proper monitoring of parents' website engagement. Tele-ABA presents a challenge in accurately assessing problem behavior and effectively providing appropriate feedback and support. With tele-ABA, the lack of immediate and appropriate feedback during the implementation of interventions is a huge concern. Even trained therapists require these elements in order to ensure proper implementation of programs. Without this immediate and appropriate feedback with correction and/or modeling if necessary, there can be issues with fidelity and hence effectiveness of the treatment. This can include the instance of a behavior that was unexpected to occur during treatment and the parent not appropriately responding, perhaps eliciting new problem behaviors. Behavior analysts are also responsible for all aspects of the behavior change program, including identifying and eliminating environmental conditions that may hinder the program in some way. This may be difficult and even impossible to do via computer. Additionally, interventions are more successful with family involvement and proper family training, yet There are many factors that would determine whether a parent or family members can fully participate in the interventions via tele-ABA. Obviously, not every parent can undertake such a daunting task of learning and implementing ABA procedures. At this time, no studies have been done to determine which factors and or characteristics of parents result in effective treatment or positive outcomes. Parents may be exhausted and unable to fully implement treatment plans, may not be able to be as consistent as necessary to ensure treatment fidelity. Whether or not the parent has other children or family members in the home to care for or other obligations can also play a role in the parent's ability to implement plans effectively. However, with in-home therapy, it's not an issue as the trained therapist is implementing the procedures as required. Also, with in-home therapy, there's the option of going into the community with a professionally trained therapist to assist the client and parents immediately and on-site. This helps improve generalization of skills across people and settings. In addition, having a professional present helps parents feel more confident and more comfortable, which gives the parent a feeling of empowerment. It's also interesting to note that in the informal survey of students in this class currently serving as ABA professionals that Marcy referred to earlier, 61.1% stated that they believe tele-ABA is an ethical mode of delivery of ABA therapy, and approximately 55.6% state that they consider ABA to only be effective when administered in person.
While my opponent raises some valid points, telehealth has multiple avenues to ensure a client's confidentiality, quality of services, and best interest is maintained throughout the duration of treatment. First, as behavioral analysts, it is our ethical duty to uphold ethical standards and confidentiality, as well as convey those standards to parents and others involved in therapy services. Specifically, Compliance Code 2.06 states that behavioral analysts must discuss confidentiality at the outset of the relationship and thereafter as new circumstances may warrant. This would involve any potential breaches that may occur and how those events would be handled. Telehealth also works to ensure sensitive information is protected by complying with HIPAA standards. According to the Telehealth Resource Center's website, there is specific encryption patterns designed to protect data from hackers. Telehealth sources also are required to have HIPAA contracts with any third-party members, such as technical staff, who might have access to any information found on telehealth databases. With these precautionary steps, confidentiality and client protection is equivalent, if not more effective, as in-clinic or in-home therapy. Additionally, telehealth is as effective as in-home ABA therapy for the following reasons. A study conducted in Iowa of 107 children provided telehealth across 3 variations. The results yield comparative services provided in-home and also via telehealth clinic. The mean percentage reduction in problem behavior achieved through FCT treatment was greater than 90% across all groups, providing that telehealth was actually equally as effective as in-home ABA therapy. Additionally, in another study, after 5 weeks of group-based intervention, Nigerian mothers' understanding of the use of behavioral intervention to reduce disruptive behavior in their children increased significantly, and 100% of those mothers would recommend the program to a friend whose child had similar difficulties. This further proves that the parents or caregivers are in fact able to provide effective therapy with the assistance and training provided by a BCBA or RBT via telehealth. While success rates are important, let us not forget Compliance Code 2.09 regarding treatment and intervention efficacy, stating that behavioral analysts have the responsibility to advocate for the appropriate amount and level of service provision and oversight required to meet the defined behavior change program goals. This simply ensures that the clients are receiving adequate and beneficial interventions. Thus, if telehealth is being used to provide therapy, it can be assumed that treatment and interventions are improving the quality of the client's life, and thus it is an effective treatment. Internet may not be feasible for all clients, but the potential to have increased access to services trumps no services at all. Families living in rural or third world countries likely have very little access to medical care, let alone early intervention programs such as ABA. Yet, as parents, it is natural to strive for the best care possible, and thus they are likely to opt for services, despite technological difficulties such as internet speed, to provide their child with the highest level of intervention and potentially a better quality of life. Wouldn't you want the same for your own child? Despite the determination to receive these quality services, poor internet may not pose a problem after all. The International Telecommunication Union suggests that 7 billion people, or roughly 95% of the global population, live in an area that is covered by a mobile cellular network. This means that most rural areas likely have access to cellular network, eliminating the need for high-speed internet altogether and further invalidating my opponent's argument against tele-ABA due to lack of high-speed internet. The therapy could then instead be conducted via telephone network over some form of FaceTime, etc. Ultimately, because confidentiality, quality of services, and effectiveness are now proven to be far from concerning, one could conclude that tele-ABA is not inferior to in-home therapy, as my opponents have attempted to prove, and would in fact be a great advancement in the ABA therapy as well as those for autism. Thank you.
And so while the pro side for tele-ABA does make some very good points, and the studies cited do seem to provide good reinforcement that tele-ABA is a valid option, there are still flaws in current telehealth delivery methods when they are not used for mentalistic therapy. As we know, applied behavior analysis is not a mentalistic therapy, and thus it requires a constant two-way communication stream between the client and anyone who is providing therapies. Additionally, if you are located off-site from the client, you do not have any control over the environment. The client may elope, as they tend to do sometimes, or may engage in behavior which would require a positional, a physical, or a gestural prompt, which would be difficult or impossible to do over Skype or an iPad, etc. This would require a fully committed parent who would likely not have the time to spend weeks worth of ABA sessions with the client, as well as the therapist. Additionally, there are rural internet delivery issues. While most people in the world do have coverage over some sort of internet network, whether that be wired broadband, satellite internet, or mobile internet, there is a need for constant two-way data communication. And speeds that support this type of communication are typically only accessible over wired broadband services. As Anne stated earlier, a large number of rural Americans, around 39%, do not have access to this high-speed wired broadband connection. There are ethical propositions as well to having analysts and therapists working off-site from the actual client. This places a chain of demands from the BCBA to potentially an RBT, a registered behavioral technician, to the parent, who is then placing the demands on the learner. This disrupts the chain of accountability that the board, the Behavior Analyst Certification Board, has set out, and puts the BCBA, who is responsible for all behavior change protocols, in a precarious ethical situation. What happens if the parent leaves the house? What happens if a parent goes to a different room and doesn't come back from 5 minutes? What happens if a parent unethically or illegally restrains their child and the behavior analyst can only sit there and watch? Additionally, Code 4.07 states that behavior analysts seek to eliminate or minimize environmental conditions that would interfere with the implementation of an intervention. If it is impossible to prompt a client as needed, or there are internet issues, then that is something that may not be able to be rectified under this code. Finally, there are other ethical implications as well in regards to the formation and maintenance of multiple relationships. Does the parent still have to pay for services if they are working to implement the services? If they still have to pay for the services, are they also considered an employee? How does this work in supervision? If they're an employee, they would need to be supervised by a BCBA at least once per month to implement these services. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. So we've provided both information on telehealth ABA and also in-home ABA services. The rates for ASD are increasing, which leads us for a greater need for services for these individuals. So with this greater need, there are both pros and cons related to which type of therapy that will be needed. So telehealth is convenient for those who live in rural areas that are too far to receive services in home, and this may also be a cheaper way for these individuals to receive services. This also may lead to poor internet connection in those areas and can also lead to confidentiality issues over the computer as well as iPads and such. In-home therapy provides services for one-on-one with these individuals, and these individuals also can receive help in the home during behaviors, as with tele-ABA they are not able to. In-home ABA does not have as many confidentiality issues and can also provide help when needed on the spot. With this being said, some family members do not feel comfortable with others coming into their home. Both ways are able to provide therapy to children, and I hope that we have been able to provide you with sufficient information on both types. We are now going to end our debate with questions from the audience. Okay, so for question 1 is, what is the BCBA's ethical responsibility when considering client preferences in regards to the use of tele-ABA?
So for this question, I think it really depends on what type of behaviors the BCBA and the parents are trying to address in the client. The study cited earlier focused mostly on FCT, functional communication training, which is focused on verbal behavior. So that wouldn't need any physical prompts or gestural prompts, anything like that in its most of its implementation. So it did prove to be effective there. However, for most of the evidence-based practices included under the umbrella of what is considered applied behavior analysis, I do think you would run into some pretty serious implications under Code 4.07, which relates to the environmental conditions and how that could interfere with the client receiving the most effective treatment option, and any conditions that could just have maybe the therapist disappears in the middle of trying to explain an intervention, or something else happens like that. So I really think it depends on the topography of the behaviors that are trying to be modified.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. The next question we have is, what confidentiality issues might arise when providing either in-home or tele-ABA therapy, and how should these be addressed?
As both sides stated, there's definitely some issues arising in terms of tele-ABA, one of those being internet access, anybody having access to files or any potential emails that are shared, confidential information about clients and the treatments that they are receiving. And then again, In-home, you have the risk of any files being left behind, any files being visible in cars during transport. However, in both cases, as I stated, Compliance Code 2.06, behavior analysts have to discuss these potential breaches of confidentiality at the outset of the relationship with the client, and then as well throughout the treatment if any issues arise. I also think that if the parent is concerned about any part of the confidentiality, that they also need to bring that prior to the start of any treatment plan. And then again, obviously there are HIPAA standards that are in place to prevent any breaches of confidentiality, especially with telehealth, making sure that there are contracts with any third parties that are involved, potentially with fixing any technical difficulties that might arise, and just the encryption to ensure that any files that are being transported are not accessible to the general public and the media world. So there definitely are some concerns, but as long as everything is taken into account of it and addressed as they arise, there should not be any confidentiality breaches or issues along the way that are detrimental.
Thank you. Next, for our final question, we have, does anybody have any personal experiences related to this topic that you would like to share?
So I have a personal experience on this topic that I would like to share. I previously worked with a family who came into contact with the in-home company that I worked with via tele-ABA. This family lives abroad in a country that does not have, they live in a country where special education is very highly stigmatized. So not only is there no ABA services, but there are no special education services generally. So when the family suspected something might be different with their child, they flew to the US, got a diagnosis, and when they went back home, they were left with no options for any sort of in-home service. Like I said earlier, nonetheless, even just like a special education service in a local school. So their only option was to try and connect with an ABA service that existed abroad. And in this case, it was with a company that I worked for. So the company provided parent training for the parents via tele-ABA, and after some time, the family was able to fly to the States and receive in-home services, which is when I worked for them. But otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to receive any services for their child. And it's cases like that which make me really happy that ABA has expanded to try and reach families who not only live in rural areas in the States, but in countries everywhere, especially countries where special education services simply don't exist.
All right, thank you, Marcy. These questions will conclude our debate today. I hope we provided you with information on both sides, and thank you for watching. Thanks.